Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
All right, Tyler Gould, another night, another new guest, another new friend of mine, right? Or a new friend to me, friend of yours, Chris Lee comes on, and the word of the night is discipline. What are you taking away from our time with Chris tonight?
I mean, it's funny, right? Because like before Chris jumped in the room with us, you and I were having this conversation about discipline. And when I think about the things that you and I were discussing to be disciplined about, I mean, I don't even know what happened. Like Chris came in and just started dropping science about what discipline really is. And I was sort of blown away by that. I was impressed by the idea of discipline and the idea of, you know, just being able to stick to something and look at the long-term goals. And that's what I felt like Chris really painted a picture on how do you maintain focus on the things that you really want to accomplish in this life.
Yeah, but I mean, he really, I mean, on all of this comes from this deep DNA level belief that we are here to create.
Yeah.
And when he starts talking about that creation and how that creation fuels what he does on a day-to-day, that's when lids start coming off, right? That's when limits just start dropping left and right. And we start realizing, oh, Chris is opening our eyes to what is possible. I mean, this idea of like, hey, most people won't get to the worst case scenario because they're afraid of the action that would actually take them possibly there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about it, like how much fear limits the risks that we take.
Right.
And on the other side of that fear, and the other side of that fear might be something amazing. Well, Chris takes us through that.
Yeah.
Man, he gets vulnerable and lets us know, like, hey, look, I'm in this spot, but let me tell you about the thing that I learned when I went to the bottom. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I really love this idea of his discipline and his faith and how those are so intertwined. Right. You know, he talks about some of the examples he had as a young man growing up that instilled discipline and faith in him. And I loved how he's translating those lessons to his own kids. And he is really committed to that idea that if you do hard things, you're going to bear good fruit. And I thought it was powerful.
Well, and throughout our time together tonight, Chris drops all kinds of things that his parents taught him along the way, you know, values and principles. And I think that's the thing that cuts through. You know, we talked a little bit about the distractions that are out there in the world and how hard it is to be disciplined. Those are excuses coming from like a guy like Mike Freeman. Chris Lee teaches those principles to his children that cut through all of that. Some of these principles are timeless, they're classic because they're eternal, and it doesn't really, all that other stuff fades away. Material things fade away. It's interesting because we got a podcast called The Richest Men in Town, and on the surface, a lot of people are like, oh, these two guys get together and talk money all the time, or they talk finance all the time. We don't. We talk George Bailey, and we talk about that rich life, and we go there with Chris, but finances does come up with Chris.
Yeah.
And that proper relationship to be able to say what I have on the table to share with anyone. And thank you to Chris's mom for teaching that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I really felt like, you know, that he talks a lot about alignment and balance and like how all of these things work together. And, you know, I don't think there was a moment in our conversation tonight where discipline either wasn't being discussed directly or it was on the periphery of what we were talking about. I mean, it was a masterclass in that.
Yeah. And I can tell when we have a good show, when there's like 3 or 4 possibilities for a title, but here there's 3, 4, 7, 8 possibilities for a t-shirt.
I agree. Chris
He's got some messages that are powerful.
Yeah, he just filled out our merch line tonight. You know what I mean? Like it was great.
And I think that there's some answers here that we have never heard before that are powerful. And I think that there's a couple times he gets emotional. It's a couple times we get emotional.
Yeah.
But when asked what would he say to the person who's about to give up, our listeners need to tune into that.
Yeah,
that's powerful. Tapping into that identity, right?
Yes. It's something that we've had. It's a theme that's been in this podcast a lot. And the other thing I thought was interesting too, Mike, we often ask our guests to paint us a picture of when they felt like they were rich, right? Like they were really blessed. Chris's answer to that is very unique as well. And it was powerful. I loved it. And quite frankly, that's where one of the best t-shirts was born, out of that part of our conversation. But it was a great time tonight. I had a great time.
The Lees are up in Washington. They're doing some amazing things. They're hanging out with sketchy folks like Dave Speck. But the family, we want to thank the family for loaning Chris to us for a couple of hours. He was powerful in ways that, we've been doing this a little bit. And our guests continue to amaze us with the way that they show up. So we really hope that folks will pull up a chair, that they'll grab a notepad, and that they'll enjoy this masterclass. I think you're spot on with that description of what Chris gives us tonight. So to Chris, man, keep going. We're excited. We are not done with that guy. We'll bring him back. I know that there's more there. But keep going, and we're excited to see what else Chris can create up there. And to our guests, enjoy this episode of The Richest Men in Town with our guest, our friend, Chris Lee.
I tell you what, Mike, let's talk about this before we started here on the air, right? We were talking about some unique items that we've seen. Hostage tape, man. Hostage
so
tape.
Here's the thing. I think the algorithm's winning, right? Like I think every device is listening to us, right? My wife and I are having the discussion like, hey, Mike, you're snoring a lot. It's not helping me. And so I've tried some things. I've tried the breathe right, like the nasal strips, right?
Yeah.
We're efforting on some of these things. Well, sure enough, the algorithm on the social media platforms, the interwebs, is feeding me this idea. Like it looks legit that there's this hostage tape product that might save my marriage by just slapping this Flex Seal tape thing on my mouth and forcing me to breathe through my nose while I sleep. To me, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
I'm curious how many people have lost their lives in the trial of this, but
well, I think the name doesn't help.
No, it does not
help. The name does not help. And Kelly is concerned that I am not going to wake up.
Well, hey,
and she, every once in a while in marriage, she just has this moment where she'll just call the insurance agent and kind of pop it up a couple, that life insurance, just turn it up a little bit for one Mike Freeman. And then, yeah, sure. Go ahead and get the hostage tape.
Yeah, I think if you're going to jump into a product called hostage tape and your wife is concerned for your life, which is a positive, she's actually she's still worried.
I mean, she's acting concerned,
Well, bumping up that dollar amount, I think I like it, man. I think that I'd like to see I'd like to hear your review. I'd like to hear the review if you choose to go that path.
Father's Day's coming up.
A list. It's going to make the list of the great gifts that fathers get: a tie, a tool, and hostage tape.
Yeah, here's a rake. Here's a trash can. Here's hostage tape.
Yeah.
But desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think we're getting close.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, so the hostage tape is meant to improve your wife's life and maybe improve your relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that whole going to bed thing. Now I think she's trying to race me to get to sleep before I do, so that, you know, maybe she goes unconscious and goes REM sleep before I start snoring, kind of thing. But like I'm really struggling because, like, I don't know why women do this, but like at the end of the day, that's when they proceed to like download important information to us.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm heading to night and I'm not retaining anything that she's telling me.
Yeah.
Right. And the next morning she's like, well, and then she's looking at me like, we talked about this. And I'm like, I don't know. Did we?
I tend in the mornings, typically what happens is I get my phone, and I look at my messages, and there's usually several from my wife, sort of recapping what she's been telling me that I've been sleeping through.
That's a nice move.
So there is some information that's being passed along.
He just knows it's lost. That was lost.
Yeah, that he didn't hear any of that. So we'll just go ahead and type it out and send it off.
That is well played. Well played.
Yeah, it's like an work memo that goes out every night. Here's the things that you need to improve on.
There's just some things that I'm fighting, right?
Yeah.
I'm dreading, like the dog that is nipping at your heel and you're just running from it. And this idea of those recliners.
Yeah.
Like you have yours, she has hers, and you got some TV trays.
Oh, yeah.
TV trays.
You got like the his and hers Barca loungers. Yeah.
I'm fighting that a little bit. But here's the thing, like, how is that working for you? Because this whole marriage, like we're coming up on 25 years. I fought a queen bed. I fought anything bigger than a queen bed and lost that. Right. I mean, there's just some things that you fight, and it's like, well, you might as well just give that up. And so a
queen bed, you're still at least you're in the same country, right?
Yeah. No,
the dueling Barca lounger says, you know what? I don't want you too close. Yeah. You know, let's not get too comfortable here. I want to watch my show, eat my microwaved brownie that I got in this TV dinner,
my Salisbury steak.
Yeah, exactly. The frozen corn. I'm going to enjoy that. And then I'm going to go to bed.
Well, and even this idea of my shows, do you guys have your shows and her shows, or are they still our shows?
Nah, I mean, we're not really show people anymore. You know what I mean? Like Ricky likes HGTV. We rarely have a moment where we're both just like, hey, let's sit down on the couch and watch shows, unfortunately. So we're just kind of going, if I sit down and watch a show, she'll pop in on it, but it's not like that's a thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So check this out. I clicked on this thing. It got my attention. I downloaded the app. I don't have a testimony of it yet, but what got me was this app told this guy that if you continue your current screen time usage, you will spend like 22 years of your life looking down at your phone.
Oh, that's crazy. What is this app?
Opal.
I'm checking this out.
Yeah. So this episode is brought to you by Opal. I just saw that and was like, there's no way I'm spending 22 years of my life looking down at my phone. So boom, it worked. I mean,
wow.
I don't know if the app worked, but the ad worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm intrigued. I want to try it. I'm curious how much time of my life.
Do you track screen time?
Well, I mean, Apple shoots me a message every once in a while and I'm like, incorrect. And I just move right past it.
So I shoot for, I got a step goal and I got a screen time goal, and I'm shooting for under 2 hours on my screen time, and I'm failing miserably right now.
That's an
under
aggressive
2 hours.
I feel like that's very aggressive.
You think so?
I think so. How much?
That's 1/12 of a day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly spending more time with my phone than I am with my children. That's terrible. But, okay, wait. I'm just kidding. For everyone that's listening to this, that was a joke. All right, and it was a bad joke, but it was a joke. Look, Mike Freeman, we have a gentleman by the name of Chris Lee joining us tonight. I want Chris to weigh in on some of these things because I think, to me, I wanted to talk to Chris about discipline, right? Because I feel like Chris wants to weigh in on some discipline things. I've never talked to him about it, but I'm getting the vibe. It's coming through the waiting room doors that he wants to chat with us about this.
Well, I'm a friend of yours, right? So he's got to be a huge fan of discipline.
Yeah. I felt sarcasm right there as you were saying that, but I'm not offended in any way. So,
well, I mean, Tyler, you exude discipline, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No, like I exude discipline for like a day or two, maybe 3, but I can't do anything past that. So, you know.
Yeah. Chris, what is going on, man?
Chris Lee, welcome to the richest men in town. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
We are doing fantastic. Actually, you know what? Let's be real. Like I had a rough day, but I'm looking forward. I'm hoping, Chris, that you will pick this thing up. All right.
I'm hoping to as well. First of all, apologize. I dropped the ball, had baseball practice, different things. Totally slipped my mind that we were doing this tonight. That's
okay. Hey, the richest man in town, right? If we're talking about living a rich life and you're telling me that you missed it to be at your son's baseball practice, that's a good excuse, man.
Well, that's what got me going in the wrong direction. My wife's trying to switch my chairs. She said this one's too squeaky, so
okay. I love it. Yeah. I love it, man.
All right, that's a little better. Cool.
Well, it is good to see you, my friend. It's been too long, man. Too long.
It has been way too long.
Yeah.
Well.
Hey, can we reminisce a little? Just I'm an empty nester right now. So Chris, talk to me about baseball practice. How did that go?
Baseball practice was good. It's my 3rd grader. He's my second to youngest. So I think this was their 3rd practice of the season. Very nice. Cold, raining, all the good things. Nothing quite like San Diego.
And so what team is he on? Is he on some cool name, or is he on they go major leagues? Is it like Mud Hens?
I don't even know the name. I think it's like some local business name, like sponsorship. It's
even better, man.
We're not that serious up here, I guess, about baseball.
Hey, I played on Bill Flowers Photography when I was a kid. So yeah.
Yes.
And are you slinging candy bars these days? You got your opening day fundraiser. Are you guys good?
Yeah, we haven't done anything yet, but I'm sure there'll be some fundraiser coming down the pipe.
Oh yeah, just buy the box. Just buy the box. Give them the money and be like, "We're cool. We're not going door to door. Not doing that stuff. Just buy the box."
No. Listen, Chris he's a solar guy, right?
Oh, so boom, he can sling the candy.
Yeah, right. The apple can't fall far from the tree. You know what I'm saying?
It's true.
So,
you gotta. Okay, so what's your boy's name?
Dylan.
Oh yeah, man. These are formative years then for him. He's going to be able to, because like if you're the top salesman in Little League, you score like a bike or something, right?
There are things like that. Yeah, my older son, when he was in 2nd grade, he won a bike in a fundraiser.
Look at that. Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
we have a little.
That's what I'm talking about. That's awesome, man.
That's the hustle, right? That's the hustle.
That's right. We know about a little bit of sales over at the Lee household. So
yeah, we'll get into that and talk a little bit about what you're doing and kind of what that path looked like. I want to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, you bet.
But we were talking, Chris, before you jumped on with us. We were talking just about discipline, right? And one of the things that Mike was talking about is, as we're getting older, how do we keep it all together, right? So we don't get kicked out of the bedroom and sleep in another room because we're snoring and everything else, right? So talk to me about discipline, man. How does that rank in your life right now?
I mean, I think discipline is the root of everything, right? Like without discipline creates the fruit for whatever you're chasing. So Yeah, I mean, it's actually a principle that I teach with my employees quite a bit, that you can't be disciplined in one area of your life and not have it trickle into another. So, we talk about, if you're disciplined when the plate of cookies comes around, you'll be disciplined to put in additional work. Or when you're disciplined with the cookies or in the weight room, you're going to be disciplined in your relationships when you're tired and you're not really wanting to invest. So yeah, I mean, it's the root of everything.
I love that. I love that.
This is feeling like a doctor's prescription for Mike Freeman right now, right? Because like that idea of how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Absolutely.
Right. And I kind of struggle. I kind of struggle with that, right? Like, because if you were to hang out with me for 24 hours, you'd see some amazing things, and you'd see some things that are not so amazing, is particularly when that plate of cookies comes around. So
right.
I definitely feel that. So talk to me, because discipline in 2023 seemed to be rather oxymoronic, right? It's how is it that we can be disciplined in this world of bombarding distractions? And I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know who's winning right now. Chris, you are the devices, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely takes it's a different day and age that we live in. But how do we do it? Yeah. I mean, discipline is the same, although the distractions are different. Distractions have always existed, right? I mean, things, there's always an easy way out. One of the things I love to talk about with my employees is choose pain now. There's no such thing as no pain. And the goal is to always experience pain in the moment, because when we experience pain now, we get fruit later, real fruit. And if we choose pain later, we get fake fruit now. And that feel good, that extra sleep in, the cookie in the moment, the whatever it is. And but yeah, you have no choice on pain. It's just one is quick and fleeting, the other one is long and lasting.
Yeah.
Fake fruit now.
All right. See, Mike, this is one of the many reasons Chris needed to be on this show with us, man. And Chris, I feel like I've been chasing you for a little while, and we've never been able to get things to match up. So I'm glad it's worked out now, but this is it, Mike. This is why we wanted Chris on the show, right?
Okay. Well, so Chris, the Richest Man in Town is about how Chris Lee became Chris Lee, right? I mean, because I think sometimes we're born with some things, but I'm curious to know where these things that you're now imparting to your employees became part of who you are.
Yeah. Little bit by little bit over time, it, started with a work ethic that I was taught at a young age. My dad was a school teacher, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, heavy center on God and hard work. And, because we didn't have a lot of financial freedom because of, my dad made about 50 to 60 grand a year. Yeah. The requirement in our household was at the age of 12, you had to be providing for everything but underwear, food on the table. And so,
wow.
So yeah, I had my first job when I was 9.
Where were you growing up?
Small town called Connell, Washington, 2,500 people.
Okay.
Wow.
And so, running the streets wild in the summer, playing baseball and backyard baseball and doing all the fun things. Had a good life, but we worked from a young age. Had my first job at age 9 and delivering papers 365 days a year. And so I never knew what it was like to sleep in past 5 o'clock. From a very young age. So
that's awesome. So what does that look like now, Chris? Like, you're a dad. You've got how many kids you guys have now? We
got five
kids. Yep. So how does that look like now with your kids? I mean, obviously circumstances are a little bit different than when you grew up. So Absolutely. How do you instill that work ethic and that discipline into your kids? And quite honestly, it's like you said earlier, it's a different time, right?
Yep.
I mean, we have distractions are different. I think that maybe distractions are a little more readily available for our kids. So how do you instill that work ethic and that discipline with your brood?
So, there's a few base principles that I base my parenting off of, but one, my kids understand that any wealth that I have will not be theirs.
It's the Shaquille O'Neal method, right?
Yeah.
I heard Shaquille O'Neal tell his kids, they said, "Well, we're rich, Dad." And he said, No. I'm rich.
Yeah. And I tell my kids, I say, hey, the best thing you can do from me is take my knowledge, because you ain't taking my money.
Yeah.
And so they know that when I die, they ain't going to be fighting over a will or an estate, that it's all getting donated to charity. And so I think, coming from that premise, they understand that there's not going to be any handouts. Obviously, when they're in the home, they get taken care of. But few things like the expectations, like my boys serve missions, and that they're going to be paying for their missions, and they do so through work ethic. Now, the good news is I teach my kids a little bit different as far as how to make money. I was never taught investing or working smart or anything like that. And so there's been a heavy focus on my kids from a young age, like how they can be like leverage their time and stuff. But same time, I do my best to be out and do projects myself, even though I can hire them. I do. In the last couple of years, I've hired more and more projects out, but anytime I have time away from work, I try to get my hands dirty for them to see that, I'm not above doing work, and I get them involved. Like there's certain work that they have to be involved in. Like we have 9 acres of cherries that my kids are. My kids are responsible to be a part of. And whether, like one of the things, we recently had them all pruned, and they had to go through and gather all the branches. 9 acres of gathering branches is quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
And the same thing, we have 2.5 acres of black walnut trees, and they over the years have had to hand weed them on a regular basis when they were small. Getting them. And so just instilling those type of things, and my kids, I try to instill the same 12-year-old thing. I pay for a few more things than my dad did. But everywhere possible, I get my kids to be involved in a financial manner. Like my daughter, we definitely could have, she's 16, and when she was 16, she wanted to get a car, and we could have definitely gone and bought a new car, but we got, a $3,500 beater, and with the expectation that she pays for half of it, and I finance it to her, and I pay the other half financed, as long as it meets inspection requirements, right? Like it's clean, it's taken care of, it's, these different things. Because
I love that.
And I don't have don't have parenting figured out. But the one thing I do know is a lot of the reason that I am the way I am, the success that I've had in my life is because of the work ethic that was instilled in me at a young age. And if I want my kids to have similar family success, similar fitness and spirituality and everything else, is that they got to experience a lot of the same things that I personally went through, and choose the harder hard, and experience pain in the moment, and do hard things. I'm constantly looking ways for my kids to experience pain. One of the things we do is cold plunge, where we have this cold bath that we get in it, and my son just set a record of being in it for 20 minutes, and it's like 30,
That's crazy.
38 degrees.
Oh my
you know?
gosh.
Yeah. And just doing, because we live in a day and age where things aren't hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's given to you. You got these smartphones, you got all these things. And so I take a pretty extreme approach. My oldest daughter, she didn't get a phone till high school, which in these days and age is extreme.
100%. Yeah.
My son, who's in 8th grade, he does like, he's got an Apple Watch, and we're planning on not giving him a phone, and just that being the way to communicate, and just, limiting electronics, I mean, obviously we screw up and we have all these different things, but those are like some of the things that we've tried to instill in our kids and separate from, we live on a small farm for raising our kids, and we've moved and done different things for our kids. Like the reason why we're back in Washington was because this is where we wanted to raise our kids, because it was such a good place to where we were raised. And so, yeah, I mean, don't have it all figured out, but those are some of the things that have worked for us.
I love that idea of you're intentionally choosing to put yourself in that farm setting because it's good to raise kids.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard you mention fruit a couple of times, and then you start telling me you got acres of cherries and acres of walnuts, and you've got a university there, right? Like people get you're able to talk harvest, and harvest is something on the calendar.
It's happening. Yeah.
It's happening.
Right. Look out the window.
So, hey, Dad's not talking metaphorically here. We're actually harvesting fruit as a result of our labors.
And I love trees. I think trees teach us more about leadership, life, God, than probably any metaphor there is. And so like that's my favorite allegory, is to talk about trees and fruit and like what goes into it to be able to produce, and how we don't work for the fruit, we work to become a great tree. And when we become a great tree, the derivative is fruit. And some seasons are bad, some seasons of bad weather and different things that we can't control, and we don't produce fruit, but that doesn't mean that we chop down the tree. We continue to take care of the tree and water it and weed it and prune it and do all these different things. And yeah, man, I love trees.
I love what you're saying, man. Put this in a book already, for crying out loud. That's what I'm talking about. I love that.
Well, I think I recently read, I think Tim Spiker, maybe, The Only Leaders Worth Following. And that idea is so much of like what you're talking about with trees and leadership. So much of what we admire about leaders is underground, right? When we think about what we see from the tree, we see evidence of healthy things that are happening under the ground in that root structure. I kind of geek out. I mean, I love that. I love that idea that it kind of goes to that idea. Like it's about the process, right? It's not necessarily about the result. You talk to baseball players, great baseball players. I think Player Tribune had an article Hunter Pence wrote one time about that mindset of going to bat and looking at the process and letting the results happen as a result of good process. And that's kind of what you're talking about right there with the fruit and the trees, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You take care of that tree, it's going to bear fruit in due time.
Right. Yep, exactly. And the thing is like too often in life, people, it's all about the fruit. And then when they get the fruit, they're dissatisfied because they weren't focused on building the tree or anything else. Maybe they cheated the way to the fruit, right? Like there's a lot of ways to cheat to get fruit. I can go over to my neighbor's farm and steal it in the middle of the night, right? I can, but you can never fake a tree.
Yeah.
Well, I can have debt and have a wallet full of cash, but is it really mine?
Right.
Right.
And a tree produces year in, year out, not always, but consistently over time.
I love the fact, you're talking about, you said choosing the harder hard. You've got this, we do hard things as a family. This is kind of the culture that you're creating. Can you back up a little bit and just talk about the lessons that you taught and took away from mom and dad growing up? And I'd love to hear, Chris, I know that you're a man of faith, and that's very important to you and to your family. Can you talk about what faith looked like in your home as a young person growing up?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a convert to our church. Didn't come from a very strong, faithful family. And my mom similarly grew up in a family that wasn't really devout in their attendance of, both of them kind of together established a pattern of worship of God. And my mom, if you ever meet this woman, she's as close to an angel as it gets. And my dad did everything to make sure that she was in the home, raising us, constantly involved. The focus was always on God. My dad was not a perfect man, at all, but always put God first. And so work ethic was there was never a question of playing, like we grew up playing sports. My dad was a football and a wrestling coach in high school and the high school teacher, but it was never a question of whether we chose sports over God on Sundays. It was never a question around those type of things. It was always centered on we were going to serve missions, and my parents married us to our missions very early, where we, when I started my job at 9 years old, I was putting money in my mission fund, and so it was like, it was never, when I went to serve a mission, it was never a choice of whether or not I was going to serve a mission. Like that was a given. And I had sacrificed the previous 10 years of my life to save up $10,000, which at that point in my life was a ton of money.
Yeah.
To go out, and there was no reliance on my parents. There was no reliance on outside help to be able to pay for this mission. And my mom always taught us from a young age, a child that sacrifices for his mission will be a much greater missionary, much more devout to the Lord. And, so that always sunk like very, very deep. And so, like me and my brother, when we were in high school, my younger brother was 2 years younger than me. We managed a bunch of paper routes, and we would get up at 4 a.m. every morning and deliver the bundles to our carriers. And we made $600 a month, and $100 went to me, $100 went to my brother, and $400 went to my mission fund. And so, my brother sacrificed for my mission, and in turn that we did sacrifice. And then, everything, like my mom and dad made sure that we understood that like life wasn't about material things. I remember a Christmas growing up, my brother was getting ready to serve, my older brother was getting ready to serve his mission. And we secretly planned that every gift under the tree was going to be something for his mission.
Wow.
And so,
awesome. I mean, for a kid,
that's a big sacrifice.
That sends a message and a feeling, right? You feel
100%. I feel that just hearing that.
I feel it right now. Like, whoa, every present.
We go and I'm giving a gift to my sister, and she opens up, it's a tie.
Oh man, I love that.
And another one opens up and it's a suit, and another one's a white shirt, and like,
wow.
And this was 6 months before he even served a mission, or even before he had submitted his paperwork, and
what a powerful way to send a message that life isn't about material things.
Yeah.
Right. And that missions are family things.
Yeah. And you know,
that's a cool message.
And in the household that we grew up in, like, we never got toys or anything else outside of our birthday or Christmas, right? Like, we didn't have money to be able to do those type of things. Like, my dad was a devout investor. He invested half of his paycheck, and he expected us to live off of rice and beans. You know, we would only go out
Dave Ramsey style. Yeah.
Oh man. Like, we would only go out to eat on our 8th birthday, our 12th birthday, and our 16th birthday. And it was only us and our parents. The other kids didn't get to come. Right. Like,
I love it, man.
You know, and so, like, discipline and sacrifice and everything was just taught at such a young age. It wasn't even a question. And so then when you only got gifts and like cool things on Christmas and birthdays, and you were asked to sacrifice that one time, right? It wasn't like, we got to go to Walmart and like, Mom, can I buy this? Right. Like, it was never that, right? Like, This was my one thing for the year. And when it was asked of us to sacrifice and give that to my brother, and like, you know, like you said, no more powerful way to send a message that like material things don't matter, but God is always first.
Wow. So Mike, this is what I'm talking about, Mike. I told Mike, I think Chris is going to have a thing or two to say about discipline, man.
Like, well, and I'm even thinking of, like, I just had the conversation that many of the things that I enjoy in my life as an adult are intentionally there because I didn't have them as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you do this? How do you teach these powerful lessons without creating a bunch of kids feeling deprived of everything? And the second they get adult and the second they start making the money, they're going to go to Walmart and they're going to buy all the things that they couldn't have as a kid. Right. Or they go out to dinner every meal and I think that it's the spirit behind it. Right.
Yeah.
It's the principle 100%. Behind it. And teaching that principle is like, no, I'm not depriving myself of anything. In fact, ironically, the richest man in town, it's not about material riches, right? But it's about that idea of like, there's so much more to life than things.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, if we're talking about, you know, if missions we'll use that as an example, right? I mean, you get a young person that's 18 or 19 years old, and you said to the world, hey, take the next 2 years off of whatever your goals and dreams were and go do something for someone else every day for 2 years or 18 months. I mean, that's a mind-boggling proposition, right? There's a lot of people that'll look at you cross-eyed if you throw that out there, but that intentionality of those continuous conversations over an 18-year span, right? When your child gets to that age, and Mike and I have been able to experience this with some of our kids, it's just like, this is what we're doing. And you talked about that, Chris, like this, it wasn't a question of if, this was what I was going to do. And so I think that I kind of feel like that same process is in play if we're talking about material things and sacrificing some of those things, right? It's not a matter of, man, I really wish I had that, you know, like when I was a kid, that bike with the banana seat and the ape hanger bars, you know?
Yeah, but the concept of value, right? Okay, so we talk about this, you know, he's slinging papers at 9 years old, right? And so when it comes time to wear the tag, when it comes time to go out there and put it all out there, right? You hang out with missionaries that maybe aren't appreciating it. And you're like, man, get out of my freaking way, because I've been preparing for this since I was 9.
That's right.
Every time that alarm would go off at 5 a.m, it was to get me to do this right now. So every minute, every second counts. And that kind of goes to your mom's teaching that that's a different missionary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, not to brag, but I was a pretty dang good missionary.
Well, I can feel it. I can feel it.
Absolutely.
I'm a little worried about Abe Freeman heading to Brazil in a couple months. Like,
well, I will say, I will not mention names, but a a leader of missionaries told me that the best missionaries that he's worked with are farmers. So there you go. Your kids working in orchards. I think you're going to do them some good, that work ethic, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, those are some of the things that, like, from my mom and my parents that I've taken and I've implemented with my own kids is like, so like my son, who's now 14, he's got a nursery of trees. So he's raising some trees that are his mission project. And, and so he's been working on that for the last couple of years. So he's married to his mission through this project. Like the choice has already been made, right? That he's serving a mission, and now he's putting in the work and the effort that will pay for his mission, and he's got goals with this nursery that it will do more over and above paying for his mission. But like, that's the initial intent. So that's the reason for it. And so every time he goes out there and he works in it, he's reminded, like, this is why I'm doing it. This is.
Well, and guess what he's thinking about? Right. He's thinking about trees.
Right.
All those things that you love about trees, all those lessons that trees have taught you, he's in those trees, and he's thinking about the gospel. He's thinking about life. He's thinking about these true principles as he's working on trees.
Absolutely. And, as I've tried to teach my kids investing and like smarter ways of making money, like, I don't give out any free lunch at all, right? Like, for example, actually when we lived in San Diego is where I started this. Getting my kids at the age of, they usually start about the age of 5 or 6. During the 4th of July, they sell glow sticks. And it's one of the reasons we do it is to get them out of their comfort zone, approaching strangers. So we do it like right before fireworks. They go, people are sitting around on their picnic blankets or whatnot, getting ready for the fireworks. And my little 5-year-old, my kids start at age 5 and they do it until they're 12 or 13 every year. And they go and they buy these glow sticks at the dollar store and they sell them for $5 at the thing. But one thing I do is I teach them about running business and investing. I say, hey, I'll help you buy your inventory, but you're going to pay me 10% interest. And so like there's no free inventory. They have to take out a loan from dad. It's a one-time hard money loan of 10%. They have to go. They go and they have to sell it. And I will not help them in the selling of but I will sit back and make sure, like, I just kind of sit back, watch them from a distance, they'll come back and they're like, they told me no. And I'm like, yeah, that's part of it. You got to keep going. You got to push through the hard things. This is part of doing the hard things. And so my kids have been doing this every year since the age of 5. And this is, and then they take this and then I teach them the value of investing. So all my kids are invested in different stocks and they're invested in different things. And so, like, I mean, my son who's 14, he's made over $20,000 in the stock market. And this is all on his money, right? This is nothing that the only thing I've done is given him a hard money loan, which anybody would give for a 10% immediate same day return. And that's why, like, I tell my kids, I'm like, look, I will teach you how to do it. And I will impart of you all my knowledge, but you ain't getting nothing free. There ain't going to be no free loans. There ain't going to be nothing. Like, I will not do anything that isn't a good business move from me. But I will teach you as a parent. Yeah. And because that is way more valuable than any handout, material good, anything that, and it's not even like the money, it's the value of investing, seeing a return of value creation, right? Like, because ultimately the reason we're here is to be creators, right? Creators is the ultimate method of receiving joy.
Man, I love what you're saying. I think, but therein lies the lesson, right? The dad's practicing what he preaches. You want to grow. Dad's gonna, I'm just not gonna hand it to you because this is how we're gonna learn. You're gonna learn from me, right?
Well, because the world
that.
won't, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, why learn the principle if you're learning the principle in some kind of artificial context of like, well, Dad's trying to teach the principle, but he's not teaching. But he's giving me a free lunch, or he's doing me. I think that I'm making some connections here. I probably need to go out and have a couple more kids so I can maybe have another run.
I was going to say, is it too late for my kids? Like, is it too late?
No.
Can you think of a time, Chris, when that faith that's been modeled for you in your home as a young person becomes your own faith?
It's interesting. I've always had a very rigid testimony from a young age. I remember being on a trampoline at the age of 8, talking with my neighbor and like testifying to him, and I don't ever remember like one moment where it was just like, oh, this is mine. I do remember like gaining a testimony of the Book of Mormon. I remember very, at that point, but for me, I've just had so many verifying experiences from a young age that it was just like that have like over and over and over just slammed me along the side of the head, where it's like I've never even had a desire to stray from my faith in Christ. And I've gone down every rabbit hole of every level of study of whatever it is, of like atheist or anti Mormon stuff or whatever it is.
Right.
And that stuff is just like never appealed to me because my faith isn't in the fruit, right? Like it's what God has helped me become and overcome just the law of sacrifice, I think is probably the thing that I saw my parents live over and over again, where it was just like, I cannot deny.
Yeah.
I remember as I think 11 or 12-year-old when I found out like how much my parents gave for fast offerings, and realizing that it was like 7% of their income, and it just like, holy cow. And then just my parents were always like heavily involved in like charitable and like like I said, we didn't have money, but everything we had was like on the table for anybody else.
Yeah.
And that was like something that my mom just was just like, God gives you things to share with others. And that was just a principle that was taught in my household from a young age. And so that it never starts with having a bunch. It starts with whatever you have. And so, me and my wife, and so like my life has always been like a series of goals and a very like I knew exactly what I was going to accomplish at a very young age. Like at the age of 12, I had my diamond ring fund completely funded. Like I knew I wanted to be married. I wanted what my parents had. So, when I came home off my mission and my high school sweetheart was still available, we were engaged 3.5 weeks later, because I knew that was the next step that I wanted to take. And then, as young newlyweds, only being married at the age of 21, everything that we had was always on the table for others. And, there was times that, one tradition that we've had that, like I said, that was taught to me by my parents was, always try to find somebody that has it worse off than us, and like take care of them, especially during the Christmas season or different things. And so, like, I mean, there was times that, like, we were maxing out our credit cards to take care of other people, and paying for it later or whatever, which I wouldn't advise to anyone, but like and doing it in a secret way that nobody knows about. And like, there's just been, and those living those principles that were taught to me as giving until it hurts, and making little sacrifices, and I don't know, those are the things that I've tried to instill in my kids, try to, make that a generational thing. Cause like, I don't want to give wealth. I want to give knowledge. I want to give the law of sacrifice.
Yeah. I love that, Chris. Like, first of all, I'm like, we need to get your mom and dad's contact information and have them on this podcast.
Okay, but can we talk about that for a second? Because here's what I marvel at. Number one, I think of that phrase, that scripture, that verse, that a peculiar people.
Right.
So, Chris, what you're dropping, and actually what you've been taught as a child, and now teaching your children, is swimming upstream from the way the world wants us to live right now, right? And so I marvel that your dad, who was a convert to church, to faith, and your mom, who grew up in a home that it's probably a lot of love, but didn't sound like a lot of necessarily church activity or going to church every Sunday, that these two people come together and form a power couple that are on the same page with these principles. And then you marry your high school sweetheart, and that same page thing is happening again a generation later. That is unique. That,
yeah,
you're both, we're talking about principles. We're talking about true principles. We're talking about, we talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ, but an element of that is living within our means, right? Being self-reliant, making sure that God is our treasure. Treasure's up in heaven, and down here things are going to rust and fall apart or whatever. But like, I mean, I just marvel that mom and dad on the same page. Chris, what's your wife's name?
Andrea.
And Chris and Andrea on the same page, driving those things home, because that is what it takes. Right?
But you know what I love, Mike, is this, that there's not like this aha moment, right? Like, oh man, my parents really had this thing figured out, and so I want to put this into play. It's like, this is foundationally, it's like, the tapestry of your soul, right? It's like, this is who I am, and it's who I am because this is who my parents were. There was never this question of, should I adopt this thing and do what they did, or should I not adopt this thing?
But I'm almost getting
this is just
vibe.
Me.
I'm almost giving this vibe. If I lived in your town growing up, it's just like, that's those Lee boys, right? Yeah. That's those Lee boys doing hard things, right? And number one, farmers make amazing missionaries. Wrestlers, that's next level, right?
Tony Beckstrom was, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's next level. When we start talking wrestling, that's a whole nother level of discipline.
Well, let's do this. Let's talk. I want to talk for a second. I want to talk about Andrea and what you guys are building together, because I love your family. I think you guys are amazing. But can you talk? I know sports were really important and foundational for you as a young person. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned and what you took away from that time that you spent in sports? Because you wrestled, you played football, right? And can you talk a little bit about that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, when you grow up with nothing, sports is pretty much it, right? And we played the two sports that didn't really require money, and wrestling required a partner. That's about it. And my brothers, and you can do it pretty much anywhere: grass, mat, carpet, tile, wherever. Some hurt more than others. And football, it's interesting. Football is kind of the last sport that doesn't have club sports, that only exist during a certain season outside of camps. But yeah, so I grew up on the gridiron. My dad was like I said, a high school football coach, and so I was always there watching guys get beat up and hurt on, and fell in love with it. And I started wrestling at the age of 4. And man, wrestling is the hardest sport there is. And it's 6 minutes of torment and blood, sweat, and tears, and getting your face beat in. And you add on the diet, dietary restrictions, and losing weight, and sweating, and spitting, and everything that I did things that would not be. So the rules in wrestling have changed. You can no longer dehydrate yourself to the level that I did when I was wrestling, and let alone my dad. So my dad was a state champion wrestler in 1969, and later wrestled and played college football and college wrestling. And he used to do crazy things where he would sleep in a plastic bag the night before a match to be able to lose weight. And, he went from, they would weigh in the morning. He'd wrestled at 190. And by the time he wrestled that night, he weighed 206. And so literally 16 pounds of water weight that he'd be sucking. And I did similar things. My freshman year, I wrestled 125, 135 my sophomore year. My sophomore year, I dieted down from 160 down to 135. And I remember the first time I made weight that year, literally I was so dehydrated that my eyelids were scratching my eyeballs, and it was like torment. And like, you go through something like that, and like just so dedicated, so like the sacrifice of like putting Skittles in your mouth to form saliva, to be able to spit in a bottle, to be able to get that last half pound of weight. That
That's
is
wild.
And that's the environment I grew up in, that it was like, you do whatever it takes to make weight, to survive, because you knew at a lighter weight you could compete at a higher level. And so that's the thing that my dad encouraged, right, to do extremely difficult things. And so
but it's no surprise. It's no surprise that your son is hanging out in 38 degree water for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost like genetic code at this point. Like, hey, Lees, guess what? We do hard things, right?
That's right. And that's actually part of our family motto, is that we do hard things. And, if other people are running away, we're running towards it. And, we embrace pain, because pain brings real fruit later. And, but yeah, and so it's cool to see it manifest in different ways with my kids. Like my son, he's one of the best in the world at Rubik's cubes, where, he can solve a Rubik's cube.
I've seen some of those videos, man.
Yeah. So like his best solve is like 5.3 seconds or
what?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to drop a video of that in the show notes. Like, he can solve a scrambled Rubik's in 5 seconds.
I mean, that's his best ever. His average is he averages between 7.5 and 8 seconds. He's doing so one of
Tyler,
the things,
what you got? Like, I got nothing.
I think I got one side in like 30 minutes, like somewhere in there,
Yeah, I refuse to let him teach me how to solve one because I want to continue to be amazed. So I've actually never solved one in my life. But yeah, and it's cool seeing him just like kind of pursue some of his own like goals and passions. Like he's building a YouTube channel around it right now. And one of his recent videos, he set the unofficial world record. The Guinness Book of World Records is solving a Rubik's Cube while jumping on a pogo stick is 9.5 seconds. And he just did it in 8.5 seconds. And
he's got the video to prove it.
He's got the video to prove it on his YouTube. So it's like the unofficial world record. Solving a Rubik's Cube on a pogo stick.
Hey, just jump off. Just bring him on. We'll just.
I know, right? Yeah. And
that is so cool.
Being a parent is like the coolest thing in the world because you get to see like the things that you teach and the principles that you live and like, and you're like, I always feel like, man, I suck at teaching this stuff. But then like, I realize like he's watching, and just with all my kids and like, it's the world's greatest science experiment. And it's just so fun to like tonight I was at my 9-year-old boy's baseball practice and like I was talking to some other parents and they don't know my son Caden who's 14 like themselves, but they brought up, they're like, man, I've heard great things about your 14-year-old Caden. Like the girls talk about how nice of the kid he is. And like, he is like, all the parents talk about this amazing kid. And it's just like, it's cool to like hear those.
I love that.
Those things about your children. It's like, yeah, it's, the things that you put them through and the principles you try teaching them and like, when it starts manifesting, you're like, like, at least I'm doing something right. I know I'm screwing up a lot of things, but like I'm doing something right there.
Yeah, man, I love it. But when you're looking at your kids and the things that they're doing, Chris, what are your kids teaching you?
Man, like I'm Caden, this my daughter, my daughter who's really, really difficult. She's 16 and a half. She's a teenage girl. She's teaching me patience on a regular basis.
Amen.
No, but she is amazing and she's caring and she's so like, she will whip me into shape. Like, I'll be like, all right, let's just pray. We don't have time for scriptures. And she'll be like, we are reading scriptures. Or I'll be like, all right, we're just going to read a few verses from the Book of Mormon tonight. And she'll be like, we have got to do, the lesson for the week. And she's like,
I love that, man.
She is like every aspect of like, we fight like cats and dogs. And because she is just like, she's so much like me in like every way that I hate. So she teaches me love and patience and like trying to be much more kind than I am, and then my son Caden just like a whole new level of discipline that I was never able to access at his age. He does like when we lived in it was San Diego. I made a bet with my kids. I think Addison, man, how many years ago was that? 2014. So that was
when did you guys leave San Diego?
2000, halfway through 2015. So
okay,
so between 2014 and 2015, which would have made my son 6 and my daughter 8. I told him, I'm like, hey, look, if you don't eat sugar for the next year, I'll pay you each $100.
I actually remember that you doing that.
And so my son who's 6 and my daughter who's 8 at the time, they're like, yeah, we'll do it. Sweet. And I was like, no way. They did. And they both went a whole year without eating any type of candy or sweet. And like, we're talking about like kids that are like obsessed with this stuff. I mean, that's the reason why I did it in the first place. And man, that's when I realized, I'm like, holy crap, like they got some good DNA with this discipline thing. And so the interesting thing is both of them have taken that money and invested it. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, my daughter turned it into, she has a half a Bitcoin with that original $100 right now. And I mean, we both know that's worth 15 grand.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But yeah, it's just, so like these are like different lessons that these kids have taught me over the years, just like how, like what it is to sacrifice and do hard things, and spirituality and like putting God first, and it's fun seeing my other three kids follow suit, and like it's just amazing having these two rock stars that are my oldest, that have like set the example for me and my wife. Like it keeps me in line, keeps me like never questioning my faith, never questioning like why I do what I do. And it's pretty awesome.
So talk to me, I think we promised we'd go back to your wife a little bit. So high school sweethearts? Okay, so take me to this high school experience where you meet the love of your life. Do you remember meeting her?
Oh, absolutely. So I remember the first time I danced with her at a stake dance. There was definitely like a connection that I'm like, I like that girl. We never saw each other much after that. And then my sophomore year, she transferred in so I grew up in this small town about 30 miles north of the big city, 200,000 people. And she lived halfway in between. And so she had gone to school in the big city and decided to, after going to girls' camp, she wanted to be with some other girls that were out in our little town. So she transferred in our sophomore year, and this was a school that, I mean, dare I say, we never got fresh meat.
New girl moves into
I mean,
town.
every girl in my grade, we had been going to school since we were kindergarten,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so it was like, every boy in the school was like, wow, new girl, cute, she's beautiful. I remember before school had started, I was headed out of the locker room, headed down to the football field, and this girl, she walks out, she's got the bag of soccer balls, and it was my wife. And I'm like, who is this girl? Right. And I had remembered that I had danced with her about a year earlier and that type of stuff. And anyways, I knew what I wanted right away, and chased her for a few weeks and fought off all the other guys. In fact, we were reading my wife's journal from high school the other night to my 5 kids, and it was awesome. It was awesome. And anyways, yeah. So we started dating when we were sophomores, but my parents, they were very strict, and my dad was the school teacher, and like we had very strict rules of like no real steady dating is what they called it. And like if we went to a dance or went on a date with one girl, we had to go on a date with another girl in between. And so like that was the rule growing. So even though I was smitten in love with my wife, I had to date other girls in between. And we broke up and had our rough patches throughout high school, but we dated for the most of high school. And I made some stupid decisions, kissing other girls, and by the time I went on my mission, my wife wasn't sure she liked me anymore. but yeah.
Did you tap into that part of the journal, Chris? Was that part of the journal that you read?
Not quite, but
Okay.
we did talk about one of our breakups, and anyways, that's funny.
So where did you go serve?
I went. My mission was in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And Spanish speaking. I also picked up quite a bit of martialese, actually.
Wow.
I served in 3 areas. My last
3 areas.
3 areas.
Wow, that's doing time.
Yeah,
That's
my
doing
last
some time.
my last area was basically a year. It was 8 transfers in my last area.
Wow.
And so in that area, the week after I went home, there was a Marshallese branch started
Cool.
in Enid, Oklahoma. So there's a very special place in my heart for the Marshallese people. And I became fluent in Spanish as well. I did simultaneous translation every week. And so that has been a great skill to keep since the mission. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And so you come home and boom, she's there.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I wrote her religiously. She didn't write me back as much. And I knew what I wanted, and I knew I'd screwed up, and then halfway through my mission, she had this college roommate that said, "Hey, why aren't you writing this guy back? He seems awesome." And she convinced her to start writing me, and we wrote religiously the last year. The cool thing is because the premise in which we wrote, it was never lovey-dovey. It was all very like building a good relationship centered in the Lord, and which was awesome. It was a great way to write a girl and stay concentrated on the mission. And so when I came home, I didn't know what to expect. And initially it was kind of weird. I was a mission, but about 6 days after, I'm like, all right, I'll quit being weird. Let's get serious about this. And so we were married 2.5 months later, pregnant with our first one. It goes along with some of the principles my parents taught. It's like, there's never a good time to have a kid, have children. Children are the greatest blessing that the Lord can ever give you. It's we came here to create, and procreation is the greatest form of creation. And so we never put it off. We never were waiting to be in a good financial place for marriage, for babies, for anything. When we were married, I had $1,000 in my bank account, and I owed $1,000 on the 1991 Ford Thunderbird that a guy gave to me after my mission in exchange for a note to pay him whenever I could.
A Thunderbird?
91. Oh, that thing was ghetto. It was terrible. You know what? Oh, that's another principle my parents taught me, like drive beaters and live good.
Yeah. I love that. You pass that on to your daughter, right? $3,800.
Yeah. So far, my problem is I drive too nice of cars now, and I feel a little disconnected from that principle. But
you gotta drive a car every once in a while. When you get out of it, you smell like gasoline. That's a sign of a good ride.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I just love these core principles that you're sharing. It reminds me a book I read a while back called The Happiness Project. Gretchen Rubin has these commandments that she lives by, right? These 12 commandments. And this is not making light of Heavenly Father's commandments that we're doing our best to follow, but things like let it go, do it now, enjoy the process, identify the problem, lighten up, right? And so I love the fact that you're throwing these principles out there like they're like they're gold nuggets that your parents gave you that you're valuing today. I
drive a beater and live well, man.
I'm serious. Like, I would love it.
That,
I would love it if my kids hanging out with their friends are like, oh yeah, my dad always says this, right? And I'm not sure, because right now it's like, don't lick your fingers at the bowling alley, right? I mean, I think we need to.
That's still a good principle, dude.
It's solid principle.
Absolutely.
Great advice.
And here's the thing too, Tyler, we always get guests. We love this question. What has life taught you the hard way? What's a truth that you hold in your hand right now that you learned the hard way? But for Chris, man, it's like, it's growing up, right? I mean, everything you learned the hard way.
But I think that's perspective, right? I mean, if you're 9 years old, right, getting up and doing the paper route every morning, for some kids, that's going to be the biggest challenge they could ever face, right? Dragging themselves out of bed at whatever time and going to throw papers in the cold weather. But I think, you become conditioned. I think difficulty, the hard thing is staring you in the face, regardless of where you're at and how steeped you are in these lessons of doing hard things. So I guess I do want to explore that question with you a little bit, Chris. Now, when you're looking at hard things, what are those principles that you lean into that help you pull out of that, or at least are sort of the lower lights that guide you through that?
I mean, it's always being embracing the hard things, like, life. And it's interesting, like, finances never change like the easiness or hardness of life ever. Right. Like, I mean, and Tyler, I know we haven't really caught up, but I've had some really great financial successes over the last few years. I've sold 2 companies over 9 figures, and been able to, set myself up where I don't have to work anymore. And the cool thing is that's when you really understand what your core principles are, because I'm no longer chasing fruit, and I'm no longer chasing society norms or expectations of society or whatnot. And so it's like, okay, what matters to me? And then when you realize, like, the things that I really love is embracing the suck, doing hard things, doing challenging things, because that's where I find joy. And, and so no longer am I getting out of bed because I'm trying to pay a bill. I'm getting out of bed because that's who I am. And that ultimately the best version of Chris Lee is the one that goes and finds the thing that is most difficult in his life and takes it head on. And it's interesting because, like I said, life just never gets easier, right? Like, there are always hard things if you're looking for them. And, when you go through extremely difficult things, like, I don't know how much I shared with you when I was in San Diego, but when I lived in San Diego, I was only 3 years off of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, right? And I had lost everything. I had less than $1,000 in my bank account, had cars repoed out of my driveway, owed my father-in-law over $1 million that he had invested into a failed business, owed my dad $250,000, who once again was a school teacher and didn't have a lot, and that invested into a failed business. Like, that was a very, very, very low point and difficult thing to go through in my life. And the cool thing is when I went through that, and it seemed like, a lot of times we don't do things because we want to avoid all these terrible things. We think of, like, the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And most people never experience their worst case scenario because they're unwilling to take the action that will potentially put them there. And I experienced my worst case scenario. And the cool thing is, it wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that bad, although it sucked and it was terrible and like all these things, and it brought me to tears, and like I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. I realized like God still lives. My family's still with me. And thank goodness, because of the United States of America, I have ability to start fresh and be able to rebound and use what I've learned. And so when you go through something like that and you experience your worst case scenario and you realize that like you only have upside from there, then going and taking on challenging things and difficult things or whatnot, it's like, it's never like that's the thing that I have as an advantage over anybody is like, I'm willing to go to zero again. And I'm willing to go to zero in really anything, because like, I'm not scared to lose possessions because I know who I'm becoming. I know that like this is the most valuable asset that I have, what I've learned, what I've grown, what I've developed. And so constantly trying to find that outer edge of what Chris Lee is capable of by doing extremely difficult things and challenges and everything. So like, I don't know if that answers your question. I probably,
that's one of the best answers I've ever had on this show, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's like that idea of most people won't go to worst case scenario because they're afraid to take the action that might put them there. You know, when we talk, Tyler, what are you afraid of? So many people talk about number one fear, failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one fear on this program has been, it's not kids dying. It's failing their family. And here, Chris, you're here saying, man, I've been able to use what I've learned from that worst case scenario. I've learned that worst case scenario actually wasn't that bad, because those principles, those truths, those things that I hold near to my heart as principles of faith, they didn't fail me. They were there, right? I love that. And I just think to myself, what are we capable of if we just stopped being afraid?
Ourselves. Yeah.
If we just stopped being afraid, Jordan last week talked about lid.
Yeah.
Take the freaking lid off, not being afraid, and just like, I'm going to go and I'm going to find that outer edge, and I'm going to find, man. I mean, it makes the alarm clock going off at 5:00 and me going in the car to YMCA tomorrow. I think I can do that. I think I can. That's not the outer edge of Mike Freeman, but I think right now, oh, freak, I don't want to do it. Like, figure this out. We're capable of so much more than we're giving ourselves credit for. And I loved so much about that answer, man. That was powerful.
Yeah.
It makes me think, and I hope this connection makes sense. But Ezra Taft Benson has a quote that I just love: when obedience ceases to be an irritant and becomes our quest, in that moment, God will endow us with power. Right. And like, when Chris, you just kind of let us in a little bit, like that thing. Now you're not chasing a dollar, right? So many people, myself included, right? When we wake up, it's like, got to go get that buck. That's the quest. It's like, no. What if the quest was actually finding the best version of Mike Freeman out there? Right. And like, when you see the challenge, when you see the obstacle, hey, that thing about you, that thing's got to go. Waking up and going after that thing.
Well, and Chris, earlier in the podcast, you said something about creating, right? Creating is that's the drive that we're all meant to do. And to be able to create takes discipline, takes sacrifice, but it also, it takes that ability to double down on yourself. Right. I think about that quote as you're talking, Chris. I'm thinking, he who cannot sacrifice pleasure at the altar of duty will never know success. Right. And I love that idea that, hey, here's the things I want and I want to build, and it's going to require me to be uncomfortable in a lot of different ways to get there. And I love that. I mean, it's counterintuitive. And I think especially today, right? Because I think today we sort of live in this world where, hey, I'll work from home in my pajamas, right? Or I'll kind of mail it in, and I went to school for X number of years, so I'm owed X number of dollars for my time that I put in. But I think the reality is, I'm listening to Chris, I'm thinking, really, if we want something that's meaningful, and we want to be able to recognize the meaning in that thing, we have to be willing to sacrifice a lot of ourselves and put ourselves in some very uncomfortable positions long-term, Mike Freeman, right? We're not talking like, oh, I'm going to get up for a week at 4:00 and go work out, right? We're talking,
I'm going to become this thing. I'm going to create this life. And this is who I'm going to be. Yeah. And I think too, like the kid who has everything handed to him talks to his friend who's 9, who's getting up at 5 a.m. doing paper route. And the kid's like, man, that sounds hard. And the kid waking up at 5 a.m. doing the paper route, here's his friend being handed everything. And he's probably thinking, that would be hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, choose your hard.
Right.
Like Chris was saying earlier, choose your hard. I can have hard now and real fruit, or I can live in some mirage where you got everything, but it's fake fruit, because that's not how the real world works. That's powerful. Choose your hard.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Chris, I've loved the time, man. I'm so glad that, we've been able to do it. Here's what I love, Mike, right? We kind of go through life and we have people kind of come in and out of our lives. Right. And sometimes it's just a season, and I'm grateful we live in a time where the Lee family comes into my life and they kind of pass through and they make an impression on me, and we can still be connected on some level and hopefully share the impact that you've had with me and other people that I know with a greater audience. Right. And that's what I love about this project. So Chris, you talked about growing up when the parents that you had and the things that they taught you. How are you honoring them today?
As far as what do I do for them, man?
That commandment to honor your father and your mother. What does that look like?
So first of all, like I said, my parents, they lost a bunch of money in my first failed business, which was terrible. Since then, I've paid them back. But also my dad, he was, as I stated before, he always invested half of his paycheck, but he invested in a way that was always just like your traditional 401k or those type of things. And so one of the things I've done to really help my parents is like actually teach them like higher ways of creating value or doing different things. So me and my dad, we've actually joint invested on quite a bit of real estate, and I've actually made him, I think, close to $2 million in real estate by investing together. And so that's been a really cool to like, as an adult, to be able to, kind of guide my dad in some of those things that he didn't have a whole lot of success as a working man himself. And then, it's been really awesome because I've been able to create experiences for my dad that is just like, imagine a kid the first time going to Disneyland, or someone that just doesn't experience a lot of things and experiences it for the first time. That's my dad. And like, if I take my parents to dinner, it's like, it's like I went all out for, you would have thought that I had giving them a check for $1 million.
Well, Chris, you were only going out to dinner when you were 8, 12, and 16 for crying out
Yes.
loud. So, you know,
Yes.
it's a big deal.
And a lot of these same things are still very ingrained in my parents. And so it's like, you know, you go and do something very small for them, and it's just like this, and it's so fun. Like my wife always talks about how amazing it is to like do things for my parents because of how gracious and excited they are. And so, you know, we couple Christmases ago, we bought them cruise tickets to go on a cruise with us. And that was just like, wow, we've never been on a cruise. And, you know, and, you know, it just having them experience like life through, like I said, a baby's eyes or a young child's eyes. And that has been so cool for me as an adult to be able to provide experiences for my parents. And, but the coolest thing about my parents is just that, like, their devoutness to God. And they just finished. So 2 years ago, they finished their third mission.
That's cool.
And they're getting ready to put their paperwork in again. You know, they serve in the temple every Friday, and like, you can never schedule something around their temple. Like, he will not, my dad refuses to like switch with somebody else for their shift, you know, like he, and I'm sure he feels like he's like still paying for some of his own sins. You know, it's interesting. My dad grew up in a drunkard home, and like when he was 12 years old, he'd be driving his dad home drunk from a bar. You know, and so like in his mind, he's just been trying to like prove himself to God his whole life. And it's just, and the thing that my mom always taught us is like, it is our duty that every generation is better. And, you know, and that we break the chains of the previous generation that held them down. And she'd preach this to us as when we were little, like, see what your father has done. He has broken the chains. And see his weaknesses. It's up to you to break the chains of that. And it will be your children's duty to break the chains of your weaknesses. And that's like a principle that I continue to teach my kids. And I constantly remind them, like, whenever my kids point out my weaknesses, I'll be like, hey, don't forget.
Break that.
Your duty is to be better than me. And like, if you guys aren't better than me, then I've failed as a father, and you're not doing your duty. And so anyways, that's been the coolest like thing to see with my parents, is just their dedication throughout the later years in life to God, and being to be a part of that and visit them on their missions, and you know, being able to give them experiences that they've just never been able to experience on their own. So a very long answer to your question.
No, that's another beautiful answer.
I'm going to ask you something, and I feel like you've already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But you know, we've talked a lot about the blessings in your life and kind of the things that you've experienced. Can you paint a picture for us, Chris, when you've, you know, in your mind's eye, you can think back to a time where you see where you're at and you think, man, this is rich right here.
Yeah. So I restate the question. You're saying, when can I look back and say, like, wow, my life is awesome.
Yeah. This is rich right now.
You know, I've always felt that way. I don't think there's ever been like one time, because like, for me, it's always eternal perspective. And although sometimes I forget it, like, but that's it. And so it's like, there's never been an experience in my life where I look at it and like, why me? Why now? Like I said, my mom always taught me to look at things like, hey, this is for your betterment. Like, this is part of the plan. This is why you go through hard things. We embrace those things. So, you know, it's it's always been great. And like, obviously I think right now is kind of the pinnacle of that though. And my hope is that every new day is the newest pinnacle. That like, I look at my kids and like, the only way it gets better than this is tomorrow. Right. And
I love that.
And you know, because if that's not the case, then I'm not living right. I'm like, I'm not creating. I'm not doing what I was called to do. And so that's my goal, is that, you know, that I am on that upward path every single day, and every single day is the new pinnacle.
Man, the only way it gets better than this is tomorrow.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a Richest Men in Town t-shirt somewhere
No,
along the line.
Hey, so Chris, what would you say to the person who's dealing, right? Everybody deals. We're all dealing. What would you say to the person that's tempted to give up right now?
Man, I just say I mean, if I'm talking to a man, I'd say you're a son of God, and it's important and imperative that you understand like why you're here. And that above all else, no matter what's going on, it's not worth whatever you think it is, and that your value is worth way more than you think it is. And so, because like from a perspective as a son of God that has the potential to achieve and create and accomplish all things, and that I must learn that in order, then it just puts life in a completely different perspective, that like the reason I feel like giving up or whatever is because because I'm not viewing it as that learning experience. But here's another theory I have though. Creation. I have never, ever met someone that is depressed or has anxiety that is actively creating, ever. And it is the ultimate, creating is the ultimate medication to anything. Like I said, depression, anxiety, feeling like giving up, whatever it is, it's because you aren't, like, that is what God sent us here to do. That is the reason why there's so much focus on it in the scriptures and the temple and the creation, to create. That is what we are meant to do. And once again, anybody that is actively creating, you will never find in a depressed state.
Man,
Almost
I
that act and not be acted upon.
That's it.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Step into that space and do something and create. Anybody else you want to honor?
And it's interesting. So many of society, like society is built around stagnation, so not creation, and destruction, right? And think about how difficult it is to create a beautiful city and how easy it is to destroy it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, and that's like, like Satan's plan is to get us into a mode where we're not creating. Like that.
I love that idea. Yeah. How easy it is for things to be torn down and destroyed.
Well, entropy,
Hard
right?
it is to create. Yeah.
That idea that things fall apart.
Yeah. And creation has to be active, right? A beautiful building doesn't maintain itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else that you want to honor in our time together tonight? As you think about where you're at in life, we've talked about some people. Is there anybody you want to do a shout out to?
I mean, shout outs to, obviously I've talked a lot about my family and my parents and everything, but definitely to my business partners. I attribute a lot of the direction I've had in my life to the people that I've surrounded myself with. And luckily I've chosen the right people that have kept me on the straight and narrow, because when you're spending 8 to 10 hours a day with people, which is a lot of times more than you spend with your spouse. It is imperative that they are for a positive example. And so, my longtime business partner, Daryl Kelly, he's been just what I always call him my work wife. And he's been my yin to my yang, the yin to my yang, and supported me, and we've kept each other on the straight and narrow, and the right focuses all along the line, and so that's definitely somebody that I would honor.
Hey, you talked about honoring your parents, helping them out, and teaching them and helping them, and you talked about teaching your kids how to invest. If somebody's listening right now and would like to step up their knowledge of that aspect of life, do you have a resource? Is there something that helped you? Is there a book? Is there a course that we might be able to direct them to?
Yeah, I think the basic, there's a few foundational books. You got Rich Dad Poor Dad, which a lot of people have read or heard of. Richest Man in Babylon. Just kind of your core principles that are timeless. Those would be two that are absolutely necessary. And I've developed a lot of different core principles that have helped me, like can't buy luxuries with anything but level 3 income and below. Only spend money on assets, or only spend level 1 and 2 income on assets. A variety of different things like that.
Okay,
I love it, man. So, Chris, first of all, I've loved the time, man. I'm so glad we were able to do this. It's sort of been like a master class. It's funny, we were talking discipline before you jumped on, right? And I joked,
or lack of
discipline, right? And I told Mike, I said, well, Chris might have something to say about discipline. And here we are, like 2 hours in, and it's been all discipline, man. I've absolutely loved it. And I've known that about you, though, that you're that way, and I appreciate that about you. But our this show is really about how do we navigate life? How do we recognize the blessings in our life? How do we recognize God's hand in our life? And I appreciate what you've taught us tonight. We end every show with the same question, and I'm going to pose that same question to you tonight. Chris, what does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
The richest. So I think it's interesting. A lot of times people that are spiritual judge those that have physical means, and those that have physical means kind of,
Yeah.
I'm a believer that a principle, if true, applies to all 4 areas of life: association, spirituality, economic, and physique. And that in order to be the richest man in town, you must be aligned in all 4 of those areas, and you must be disciplined in all 4 of those areas. And that, a man with a wonderful family that weighs 400 pounds is miserable. And a man with $1 billion in his bank account that's divorced is miserable. And I'm a firm believer that you can have it all, and that money isn't the root of all evil, but it's the magnifier of who you are. And that those that have righteous desires and desire money can take it and utilize it in a way that can be far more impactful than anything else. And so for me, it's the pursuit of what Chris Lee is capable of accomplishing, and never settling for comparing myself against anybody else. So being the richest man in town is being the best Chris Lee that Chris Lee can be in association, spirituality, economics, and physique.
Alignment,
Mike Freeman. Alignment, man. I love it.
How many times does that come up in these conversations, right?
You know what I love though, Chris, is we've been doing this podcast for a couple years now. And we ask that question to every single person that comes on here, and you would think we'd have a lot of the same answers. Everything's been different. And I love your answer tonight. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate who you are, what you're doing, what you're building, what you're creating. And I appreciate the knowledge that you passed on tonight. And I'm looking forward to having people that don't know Chris Lee get to know Chris Lee. I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned with our listeners. So I appreciate you, man. It's been a ton of fun. Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a ton of people listening and learning because we're listening and learning. Right. And really when it comes down to, we love our listeners. Thank you for the support. But when it's right with the three of us, right. When I'm hanging out with Chris and Chris is dropping some things and it's changing how I'm thinking about myself, how I'm thinking about how I'm going to attack tomorrow, man, that's it. That's what I appreciate, Chris. So thank you. Thank you for the way you're showing up, for the way you're living that life. Tyler, always, I appreciate you connecting me with people that I didn't even know existed, right? And so, Chris, thank you. You know Dave Speck?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he lives just down the road from me. I actually saw him tonight at baseball practice.
Give him a hug. Give him a hug from Mike Freeman and Tyler Gould. We love that guy.
He's an alum of Richest Men in Town. So
yeah, I saw that. That's interesting.
Well, hey man, we love you. We appreciate you. Make sure you tell Andrea that we appreciate her letting us borrow you for a couple hours tonight. I know that's a sacrifice. So let's do it again sometime, Chris.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.